reminder, everybody, once again, make sure your phones are silenced, please. And please remember to share the microphone in your rows. We have no opening statements or anything like that, so you guys can get questions for Kevin and Lindy.
As far as the hockey staff or the coaching staff moving forward, are there going to be any changes at either one?
Yeah, we'll take a look at everything. Obviously, we're just getting through the season wrapping up, the exit meetings with the players. Lindy and I haven't even had a chance to sit down yet together since even talking to the players, but we're willing to do whatever we think it takes to help our team get better. So we'll definitely look at everything.
Kevin, there was a report today that there might be a front office shakeup of some sort. I'm not sure. Elliot Friedman had it. I'm not sure in which you're staying with the organization, but in a different capacity. Is there anything you can say on that?
No. I think what I just said to Paul, I mean, we want to get better. We'll look at everything. We'll have meetings with Terry coming in the very near future where we'll, as we would typically do after a season, review everything, talk about the roster, talk about everything in the organization, hockey operations, where can we improve, what do we need to focus on, and we'll make any decision we need to make that we think is going to help us get better.
Kevin, when it comes to the culture of the room, of the team itself, that's something I know that you're sensitive to. I mean, it wasn't long ago that it seemed like it was in a good place, but clearly there were issues this season. I mean, Lindy mentioned it in a few different times, including in the embedded video. I'm curious what was your takeaway from maybe what went wrong with the dynamic of your team, and how did you see it evolve as the season went along?
From the culture perspective you're talking about? Yeah, it's a really it's an interesting, tricky thing to try to talk about, because culture's earned, like in terms of your daily habits and the things that you do, and what I believe we need to probably reflect on and do a better job of, and I shared this with the players over the last couple of days, is more of our players starting with looking in the mirror first. And if we all do that, across the organization with, okay, what can I do better? How can I be the best version of myself in my job as role as general manager? The coaches do the same thing. The players do the same thing. That starts to build a culture of, accountability. That's, to me, what really accountability is. It's knowing that I'm doing everything, reflecting and being self-aware with what starts with me first. And I think then that has a way of starting to work its way through the room. So I think that if I was to kind of sum it up, like if we do a better job of that and then you get more positive results, better things start to happen and a better culture is built, and that's something that we'll continue to work on and talk about.
You've touched on the impact that guys like Zucker and Greenway have had in terms of leadership, but did you overestimate the readiness of some of these younger guys to lead? You look at the leadership group and a lot of inexperience and guys that haven't played in the playoffs and haven't been in big game situations, and clearly like Greenway and Zucker have helped bring some wisdom in that area.
Yeah, I mean, leadership comes in all forms, and just because you have a letter doesn't mean, or just because you don't have a letter doesn't mean you're not a leader. So I think you hit on a couple really important players that aren't assistant captains, but they're really, really good leaders and critical guys in our locker room. So, I think there's a maturing that goes on in a learning process. I think Rasmus would be the first one to say, as a first year captain, you're finding your way, you're gaining experience in that role, and he started to find his own style, what works best for him as the year went on. And I think just being authentic and is kind of the message that I was delivering to the guys. And it's by committee. We need a lot of different guys leading. It's not just one player, and that's something we'll continue to talk about.
Kevin, you from a standpoint of house cleaning, you talked the other day on the radio. Lindy's going to be back as coach. You're both under contract. Am I correct in saying because you haven't talked to Terry, you haven't received an assurance from Terry you're going to be in your spot for next year?
Yeah, I mean, those meetings come up it'll be very shortly where we'll sit down with Terry and talk about that. And what I can tell you, Mike, is I talk to Terry every day. He's as frustrated as I am with the way the season went and where we are. And I'm certainly sure that he'll be asking me a lot of hard questions and why we are where we are and where do we go from here. So. But that's just, kind of the normal process that we go through.
Players and coaches evolve. If you're back as the GM next season, how much does your mentality have to evolve into a level where you react more instead of building for the future? You've had that 8-game losing streak in November of 22. You mentioned in Florida with us the winless streak this year, how you might have handled differently. How much do you have to be a different GM next season in a complete, total must-win this season now mentality?
Yeah, it's a fair point. We have to win. We have to win, and we know that. I know that. The players know that. That's the only thing that's going to really matter at the end of the day. The words I say or what I explain or a plan I can lay out, but it's really just about winning. And so the reason I say that is because would I be more reactive to try to do something next year? Potentially, but you also still have to look at the big picture and weigh all that and not do something emotional or overreact in my job, because there could be a short-term bump that you're hurting your team long-term. So you do always have to balance that, but I understand the urgency then in what we need to do to win hockey games.
What is your thought with Bo Byram? Would you like to wrap him up for a long-term contract, or would you more get him for another couple of years or two, see how it goes? What is your thought with him?
Well, I think Bo had an excellent season. He's a Stanley Cup champion at a very young age and extremely talented. And when we traded for him, we didn't exactly know where he would fit or how. When we were willing to kind of make that bet to say, let's bring in a really, really good hockey player and let's see how it shakes out. So I think he had a nice season, did a lot of good things for us. And we're going to start to talk about that now as we get into the offseason. What makes the most sense for our team, just the way our roster sits, long-term versus short-term contracts. I mean, there's obviously salaries you have to look at and projections. So it's a hard question to answer, but I guess what I would say is he's a really good player and we'll be open to anything.
Kevin, the final quarter of the season, like the last 20 games, there was significant improvement. From your perspective, just what happened over those final 5 weeks, and why did it take 60 games to get going and so forth?
Yeah, I think we played. We did a little better job of playing the game the right way for bigger chunks of the game. You're not going to play 60 perfect minutes. No team does in this league, but we did a better job of not beating ourselves. I thought we did a little bit of a better job in the last 20 to 30 games in terms of just being situational awareness. Where are we? Where's the clock at? Where are you in your shift? Where are you on the ice against the other team's top line versus fourth line of maybe that's not the time to make a play or it is the time to make a play. Like those type of things, I thought we did we had a better commitment and a better understanding and better buy-in to that. So unfortunately, it's hard to chase points late in the season, and we played some good hockey down the stretch, but it was too late.
Lindy, you arrived with a lot of confidence and determination to turn this thing around. Where do you think you fell short in maybe underestimating culture, or what needed to get done as the season began?
I still remain very confident. I mean, I'm angry with myself for not getting the job done. A realization now I've got a lot better take on the players. I mean, there's lots of different reasons, as Kevin mentioned. But we don't have to break down every segment of the season. But I didn't think we started well enough. Our inconsistency, hurt us as the season went on. Win 3, lose 3. To answer even at the end of the year, just the previous question, we became. I think there was a lot of things that played into it. We got terrific goaltending. We scored more. There was a lot of games where we could outplay our opponent, but we didn't outscore them, and we didn't score timely goals. That hurt us. This last segment, we had a combination of a lot of good things going on. We had timely scoring, we had good special teams, and we had good goaltending, which led to a good, consistent run where every night we were in a game that we felt we could win. And when you play like that, you get to win on a consistent basis. We just, throughout the year, early in the year, we had trouble with adversity. I think I talked a lot about that. Later in the year, I think we dealt with high-pressure situations better. I think even, just look at the last game. It was a game that probably early in the year, we might have found a way to lose. But by the end of the year, we were a team that was able to push through and win games like that, where pressure mounted inside the game, and we were able to push through and win. But we just didn't get there quick enough.
Kevin, were you aware of Josh Norris's oblique injury at the time of the trade?
We were. I would say that he had been cleared to come back and play, and once he got here, I would say that there was a feeling that maybe he'd come back a little bit too early from that. I don't think it would have changed anything in our mind of making the trade, that's for sure, because we did this for long-term reasons. But we were aware of it, and then unfortunately, it was so quickly when he got here, re-injured it, and it's almost like he had to start over. Those are tough injuries, and he's doing much better. He would have been very close to being ready to play if we were still playing, but we did know about it.
Kevin?
We've had this conversation at these venues multiple times. The idea of spending to the cap, it became a big talking point. You think back to the Skinner buyout, different things, but you look at the playoffs this year, and none of these teams in the playoffs are more than $1 million, $2 million from the cap. And your reasoning behind that has always been the narrative of you have to have room to pay your guys. You have your RFAs coming, and now you have Peterka and others coming. How much potentially, when you talk to Terry, might be we have to, with the cap going up and with some of these guys, we have to be much more of a cap team than we've been to be competitive given the landscape of the league?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the cap's a magnet to some extent, and over the last number of years too, with just the way we're coming out of COVID, and there were a lot of teams right there. We were in a different place just based on how we were going with youth, and we had a lot of entry-level contracts. So what I was probably trying to explain was that you're not just talking about the next season. You're always, in my job, you're trying to project into the future, and if you make a decision in the summer just on a 1-year focus, it could come back to really bite you a few years down the road, because now maybe you can't sign one of your own players to a longer term deal. So that's, I guess, just philosophically, just to help you understand what I probably meant by what you were saying. So where we are now is in the next kind of, I would say, evolution of our roster, and where we've now had a number of guys sign. We have more coming now. This has always been kind of the year that going into next season where we felt we were going to be right around the cap, whatever that number was. So I would, and it's never been, just so you know, Mike, it's never been a talking point from Terry about cap or no cap. It's about, putting the best team we can together setting us up for sustainable success. And he's continued to tell me that to provide every resource that we need to win. And that's all I can ask for in my job.
Kevin, Ukko-Pekka had some nice stretches, but he clearly wasn't up to the level of last season. Just from your perspective, just what happened to him, and do you still view him as your number one going forward?
Yeah, I have huge amount of faith in UPL. Even my exit meeting today, with him, I was really impressed with his maturity and his diagnosis of his game and, his season overall. I have a ton of faith in him. I think with goaltenders, especially relatively young goaltenders, there is a lot of variability year to year, just in terms of just ups and downs. And so I have a lot of faith that he's gonna bounce back and have a really strong season next year. But what I will say to that also is we need to play better in front of them. We need to defensively be better. In terms of just not giving up some of the really, call them grade A chances. Too many of those, or breakdowns where we give up too many rush chances, odd man rushes, stuff like that. We need to clean some of that up, and I think that also goes a little bit hand in hand with then you get better goaltending performance as well. But he'd be the first one to say that he wants to have a better season, and I believe he will.
Kevin, understanding that there's not much left to say other than we need to win, how do you make your case to Terry in the meetings, the upcoming meetings, knowing that 2 years ago, you declared this window of competitiveness open, and this team has taken 2 steps back in each of those 2 years? Make
my case for just
the job that you've done.
Yeah. Oh. Well, it's not good enough. That would be the first thing I would say is to be honest. I believe we should be a playoff team right now, and we failed. So it's owning that, taking my responsibility for that, and then moving past that and saying, here's how I see us improving and what we can do to fix it. So, as always, just being very honest in my conversations with Terry to say where I think that I've made mistakes and where I think that we can fix certain things, and that's what I'll do. But I do believe that we're closer than farther. But the words are the words. We have to win hockey games, and I understand that.
Lindy, when you talk about the culture and improving it or changing it, what specifically do you think kind of needs to happen to get that culture where it needs to be?
Well, ultimately, it's a group of players that believe in each other. It's not a group of players that maybe complain about each other, complain about plays. There's a lot of mistakes inside of a game. It's bringing a group together that is really connected, and they're committed to the same thing. It really is. The culture is a team first attitude. That the team comes first, and that might be giving up individual success at certain times in the game. That is including blocking shots when maybe you're not the best shot blocker, or getting in the way of people when you probably don't want to. It's a selflessness culture, and there was times I thought we were really close to it. That we've gotten a lot better at it, but we failed the test at times. You guys know the various incidents through the year that I think that I was disappointed in, and to a man, our group was disappointed. Really hard learning points at different opportunities in the season where I think we failed, and then picked ourselves back up and started to build again. And I feel that the group is connected. They are committed, but we just didn't respond sometimes to what I thought were big culture moments.
And Kevin, I'm curious, when you have these conversations, whether it's with Lindy or players in regards to culture, how eye-opening has it been? Because, this is year 5 for you. It's sort of a culture that I would think over the last 4 or 5 years you've built, right? This is your roster. So how eye-opening has this season been in that regard?
Well, I think there's a frustration out of all of us that we're not where we expected to be and where I believe we should be, based on just the talent on our roster and what you look at on paper. And there's a lot of things that happened through the year that can explain why we ended up where we did, but we have to fix that. So for me, it's I guess, Matt, it's being honest and having honest conversations, and making sure that we prioritize the right things, and that's the standard of all of us being at a high level and pushing each other to that level day in and day out. And that's all the things you do, not just at the rink, but away from the rink. And I guess that's the part that I just see us needing to take a step forward. And you're right. Ultimately, it's on me, and I'll do everything I can to fix it.
Kevin, when you look at the positive impact that a veteran addition like Jason Zucker made on this team, as you move forward into the offseason and look to get this team in a more winning mode to try to make the playoffs next year, how do you balance letting the youth on this team sort of continue to grow with what you saw that Zucker provided this team, maybe their experience in the league allowing them to better handle adversity, which is something you guys mentioned? How do you balance sort of that as you go into the offseason?
Yeah, I think you kind of go into the off season after you get through these meetings today, and then you start to go through the whole season and evaluate and have the conversations, and then you come up with your off season plan of, okay, where are areas we think we can improve, and there's a lot of areas we need to improve. But I think where the veteran player comes in that can be really beneficial is just sometimes the ability to keep things in perspective. And I think, Zuck did a pretty good job of that. It was interesting in my meeting today with Yuri Kulik, he said Jason Zucker's the best person he's ever met in his life. He took care of him and, helped him move into his apartment. And so those are just little things that go a long way. And so if there's players out there, whether it's free agency or trade, that we think can move the needle and help us also on the ice, because it's great to have a good guy and a good veteran, but they need to be able to help on the ice as well. We'll certainly look at that, but it's a balance. I think the good news is some of our younger players have now, they've been in the league a few years. It's not their first or second time through, and that's so that's something you balance as well. That just looking at that on paper, it's a guy like Owen Power, still relatively young player for age. Well, not relative, is a young player for age, but having been through the league a few times now, that's experience that's very valuable for him.
Kevin, you have a lot of work to do, obviously, with your RFAs, but for all the talk we've heard legitimately over the years, how important it is to have guys who want to be here. How important is talking to Alex when it comes July 1st and getting a deal done with him to keep him on this club when he's such a central part of it, and you saw the season he had this year?
Yeah, I mean, he's typically a guy that leads our forwards in minutes, plays in every situation. I agree with you. I thought he had a tremendous season, and he loves Buffalo and wants to be here. So he's a priority. He's a guy that we certainly hope to have for a long time.
Kevin, do you believe your core as currently constructed is what you need moving forward? Or do you think that you need to make some sort of major change?
Well, I think for me, you look at every single possible way to improve the roster. And if that means we think someone in our core needs to be traded because you bring in someone that helps you, then you do that. So it's not as simple as just saying, like, this is your core and you're sticking with it no matter what. I think you always have to be open to areas and ways to improve. So I'll continue to look at everything and have those conversations. But do I believe that we have a core group of guys that you can win with? Yes, I do. And it's up to us to help them. And it's time to take a step.
Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the special teams? And I know they haven't been where you would have wanted them to be, and that could have won you some more games. Is it more personnel, or do you see it more as something systemic that you can change in that regard? Yeah,
I think it's an important thing that we improve on, and I'm sure Lindy can jump in after, and just maybe from a more systemic and just the way that special teams run could give you a little more insight and his thoughts. But what I can tell you is we need to improve. They need to be better, both our power play and penalty kill. I do think we have the talent and ability with the players we have on a roster to be better than where we finished, and that'll be a focus this offseason for sure.
Yeah. I'll add that. You look at. We made several changes in system-wise, even inside during the year, that I think helped. First, if I want to deal with the power play, the way it started the year, it could have helped us win a lot of games, but it didn't. It didn't help us. Inside those games, there was opportunities, good opportunities that we didn't finish, but it didn't get the job done. I think the latter part of the year, the last 40, with moving some pieces around, getting a little bit more motion on the power play really helped. And I think the numbers prove that out. I think again, puck management on our power play hurt us, where, we didn't make that next play, or a lot of times made an errant next play hurt us. And with the penalty killing, I think the same thing early in the year. What was failed clears, having the puck on our stick and making that errant play that didn't get us out of the zone cost us dearly. I think losing Greenway was a part that he was probably our top penalty killer. Hurt us. We broke in some younger guys that helped us, but I think probably one of the biggest thing was big individual mistakes, not structure. When our structure was good, there was games where we were locked in, but not clearing the puck. And there was a few games where misreads on coverage really hurt us dearly in a couple games, but we had put together some pretty good runs where, especially our penalty killing was looking good, but then all of a sudden you would have a game where you give up 2 or 3 and it just kills you.
Kevin, Yuri was eased into the lineup as a winger at the beginning of the year, and by the end he's centering the top line. Just what did you make of his maturation, and why did you send him to Rochester?
Well, I think Yuri had a tremendous rookie season overall. To me, he's definitely a center. Sometimes guys can slide over the wing, but I think long term and ultimately he proved, in his rookie year that he can play center. He's a very sound defensive player. Lindy had him a lot of nights matching up against the other team's top line, and that's a pretty, hard thing to do as a 20-year-old in this league playing center. So impressive. The thought process on Rochester is, they think there was a chance for him, an opportunity to play in the Worlds, which would have been a great option as well. But when I really kind of thought this through, he's 20 years old, and I feel that Rochester has a really good team and a opportunity to do something really special. And my expectation for our players is that we're going to be playing, into June over the coming years, and I want our guys used to that. And I also think if there's a chance to win a championship, and they go down and have success, I think that would be great for Yuri's development. And he also spent a couple years, and we had a great conversation. Lindy and I spoke to him immediately after the game just to explain, the thought process and why and what we thought this could do for his development. And and then meeting with him again, today, he had a big smile on his face and said he can't wait to play in the playoffs and go and, do that. So I think it was it was just part of the thought process is what makes him be the best player he can be. And we just thought this would be a good opportunity for him.
I know you mentioned that.
I'll just add to Yuri if you want. Again, you go back to the early part of the year where we slid him in the middle when Tage was out. He really played well in that little segment, which made me feel like this kid should be playing center. We were on a West Coast trip, and I thought, boy, he's looking like he becomes a lot more effective and skates more down the middle. Later in the year, like the defensive numbers were with him playing against top lines and playing in the middle were so good. And then playing alongside of Thompson, this isn't till the end of the year, but there was a segment leading up, probably with 15 games left, that Tage's numbers were better on the wing with him there than anybody else. And the matchup against top lines, which most coaches would be scared to play a young guy against top lines. His defensive reads and what he was doing defensively made it a matchup that I actually think started making us better on the road. I could play them against other teams' top lines, and the production was still there on the offensive side. So he basically made the decision for me, like just with the way he played and how effective he was being.
Kevin, you mentioned that you still had to evaluate certain, when it came to the coaching staff and hockey ops, but what is your level of concern with just strength and conditioning when it came to the group? You got a young team. You need some of these guys to make gains. You look at some of the types of injuries that you had this year. A lot of more soft tissue stuff. How do you measure that against the fact that you have younger players and back-to-back performances, road? What is your sense on where things stand there?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be part of, we'll review every part of the organization, and that'll certainly be something we take a look at and a deeper dive. I guess I would characterize that area just as I would other, it all has to be better, but starting with me. I'm not gonna say that there's areas that we can't improve, because we have to improve, and that's an area that we'll take a look at for sure. But it's hard for me to talk a lot about it, because I think it starts with me, and I have to be better, and we'll go from there.
Kevin, how much can you talk about UPL and his performance, and you have to evaluate goaltending as a whole. You don't know if Reimer's coming back, if he's interested in coming back here, what's going to happen there. How much can Devin Levi push the envelope? Here's a guy who still has hockey to play. You don't know. He could play 5 games, or he could play into June, like you said, which would be a significant impact on the organization. How much can he continue to push you guys in your decision-making just by what happens here in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Mike, and I think that's the opportunity that's right at his fingertips, to be able to go out there and play big games and playoffs and, carry a team. That's a great opportunity for him. So it'll be part of the evaluation for sure. I believe, I've said this over and over, and I believe Devin Levi is going to be a very good goalie in the NHL. It's really up to him when the time happens. We've been patient. We've wanted to make sure that he's getting the appropriate number of starts the last couple of years, making sure that we set him up for long-term success. But I think he's right there. He's had a very good year in Rochester, and certainly if he can take a step here in the playoffs, it'll be impactful for sure.
Kevin, when it comes to Tage Thompson moving to the wing and Lindy's evaluation of how Yuri played at center, does that mean you feel comfortable with having Yuri and Josh Norris as your ideal top 2 centers, or is that an area that you think you might have to address in the offseason?
Well, I think you will address, we'll look at that for sure. I do think, trading for Josh Norris, in our mind, was giving us for the next, obviously he's got a long-term contract, a top 1 or 2, centerman. And I think Ryan McLeod took a big step this year in terms of just his overall game. We knew we were getting a really good, solid player that could be a top penalty killer and could play, different, up and down the lineup. But he, really took a step in terms of just his overall game, his offensive production, and I think he's even got another step he could potentially take. So, when I look at Krebs had a good season, took a step forward. You got Kozak that showed that he can come up and play a meaningful role. So, when I look at that with those guys all in the middle, I really like what I see. Now, would we look at other areas or, other options to potentially, of course, we'll always explore everything to see if there's a way we can improve our roster. But I do like the way our middle looks right now.
I think that, when you look at it, it's always easier to take a centerman and put him on the wing. You look at McLeod when he played in Edmonton, he played a lot of left wing. I think he played the whole finals at left wing. But it's hard to take a winger and make him into a centerman for the most part. You look at Tage. Tage can easily go back into the middle. You could be one injury away from Tage being in the middle. Or inside of a game, if you've got a right winger or left winger really going good, you can just stick Tage in the middle. It's the option that is a really good option to have. And Yuri is, I maybe praised him a little bit too much for you guys, but he's a young guy that he earned his way by the way he played. Can he maintain that? I'm hoping so. I really feel, but you still have an option that you still have. You know, we got Norris, we got McLeod, we've got options of guys that can go in there. Doesn't mean that he's locked into that position, but it from what I saw, and if you look at, you know, this last segment where we had no Norris, and Norris was playing with Tage before he got hurt. It looks like a good possibility he can sustain. And, you know, part of Yuri going to Rochester and playing, I think the Rochester playoffs is more like NHL than I've been at a lot of world championships. And there's good hockey, but sometimes, you know, you get on the big ice and it's not near as intense and physical as what you would face here. And I think this prepares him. My conversation with him was, this prepares him for, you know, what is next for him and how it can help him even make us better.
If I could follow up on Mike's question, it's more of a comfort level question for both of you, if I could. We know Devin Levi's having an all-star season in the AHL, and you talked about that. And I remember even Luukkonen last year, his numbers, his last 35 games were some of the best numbers in the league. So they both, but, you know, when it got down to it this year, you know, when you, at the end of the year, James Reimer appeared to be maybe the guy who was going to give you the best chance to win a hockey game. So moving forward for both of you, when you look at your goaltending, and as you said, you've got to win hockey games. You've got to start winning hockey games. Do you have a comfort level in two young guys who possibly could both be very, very good, but do you have enough comfort level in them to go into the season with them both?
First, I'll start with UPL. I believe in UPL. Until I get the team to clean up some of the poor puck play, it's going to be hard in any goalie. You know, I would just say you look at our game against Philly and what we gave up on the shorthanded sense in the game again. There's nothing your goalie's going to do about that play, and except make maybe a highlight or ESPN reel type save. To that point in the game, it was a game that you're comfortable with anybody in goal. The way we were playing, we were defending well, we were managing the puck well. But it is the area that hurt us the most, and the area that the whole year tried to keep improving. And I've seen improvement, but inside of the game, you look what happens on a play like that. You're asking your goaltender to make an unbelievable save. He shouldn't have to make that unbelievable save. That's on the group. It's not on the goalie.
And from my perspective, I think about it, how Lindy's talking about we need to be better in front of him. We need to clean up some of that, for sure. But also, we'll look at everything. You know, like if we think there's an opportunity to upgrade and make our team better at any position, we're going to be open to that. So, you know, I'm certainly not scared of going to the season with UPL and Devin because I believe in both of them. But I also, it goes hand in hand with Lindy, with what he's saying. I think they'll both look better if we play better, you know, defensively and just clean some stuff up. So, but we'll continue to look at everything.
And that's kind of one of the roads I wanted to go down here with you, Lindy, especially. You guys found a lot of offense this year, even with the power play struggling. But we saw so many plays where, you know, forwards were turning the puck over at the line in the neutral zone, creating opportunities. The goalies were left out. But ultimately, as I look at your team, you know, Dahlin is, you know, at the cusp of being a Norris guy. The rest of your defense wasn't even close to being good enough to survive a long season. When you'd have your exit interviews with these guys, and when you think of guys who aren't even on the team right now, what does your defense need to be like to be good, to be successful in front of UPL, Levi? And how can this defense core, some of these guys who we know are going to be back, how do they have to improve their games to get you there?
For me, it's easy. Number one, puck play. Number one is puck play, with your decisions you make with the puck. Number two is your decisions when you're staying in the zone or getting out of the zone. You know, you look at even last game again, we gave up a 2-on-1 because we stayed in the zone for no reason. Those are decisions that let's say it's your 5-6 defenseman, he shouldn't make that decision. Because the reward a lot of times isn't worth the risk. And the nights we made a lot of good decisions, the chances went way down, the high-risk chances went way down. And if we can improve on that area, I think that's what Kevin and I have talked about the group needs to be better. And that will help the goaltending out itself.
Kevin, we haven't talked to you since you signed Jacob Bryson, and obviously there's not a lot of roster spots to go around on this team, and you've kind of delayed some of the talks on the RFA. So I'm just curious what the thought process was of locking him up at that time.
Yeah, I think when Jacob is, first of all, he's one of the most well-liked guys, in terms of the locker room and just his work ethic and positivity, and it's infectious in terms of just how much he cares about the team and how much the guys care about him. So when you're in the role that he plays, that's a key part of that, because there's times where he could be scratched for a number of games, and sometimes guys get really miserable and bitter, and it can hurt your team. So where he's at right now in his career is kind of one of those depth defensemen that can jump in and play, or he may be out of the lineup, and he's also proven that he could be scratched for an extended period of time and jump in and play good hockey, and also play either side, and potentially Lindy doesn't have to hide him, or Marty Wilford, he can go out and play against the other team's top players when he's playing. So those are all the things that go into the thought process. And also there's not a ton of UFA free agent defensemen to be out there in just the market, and I just think it doesn't change our mind in terms of how we're going to build the team or add defensemen if there's an opportunity. And I just wanted to make sure that going into next year we don't have a shortage of guys that can be impactful when they're in the lineup. And I do think from the Rochester perspective, Ryan Johnson's right there. He's right on the cusp of making a step and being part of our everyday lineup. But some of our other prospects are still young and developing, so we wouldn't want to be in a position where we're kind of leaning on them before they're ready.
Lindy, go ahead, Paul.
Are you still looking for a partner for Owen? I know you've mentioned it before. A veteran type of guy who's got his back no matter what, that is going to be out there with him and talk to him and always have his back. Are you still looking for maybe that type of player to acquire for him?
Yeah, I think. It's a tricky thing to try to explain, and I want to say it the right way. I don't think I've done a good enough job of helping Owen in terms of just that guy that's out there on the ice with him every game for his first few years. I haven't been able to get that right person. In saying that, I talked to Owen today about that in terms of what does he feel like he needs is someone next to him, and what makes sense. And it's interesting, he said, no, I have no problem playing with anybody. I've no issue with anybody I've played with over my career. And he said just the one thing that it helps him is someone that can move the puck and be clean with the puck touches. It's why I thought he and Bernard Docker played pretty well together, because JBD is pretty simple with the puck and just makes good decisions. And so I guess what I'm getting at is it'd be great to get an all-star right shot defenseman that could just be next to him for the next bunch of years, but it doesn't always work like that in terms of the just acquiring that player. So we'll look at it, but I think just figuring out what that mix is something that we have to probably look at and do a better job of this summer with our D-core overall.
Is it for the team in general, Kevin? Toughness? I mean, just from my perspective, Alex Tuck shouldn't have to be the guy to step up and fight somebody because Yuri Kalik got clocked. It just seems like that's a skill set that you're missing, especially after you traded Dennis. Yeah.
It's and there's, it's interesting. I think the most impactful way to think about it in my mind is team tough, like where guys are just together, every whistle or there's just a pack mentality. And I do think we were nowhere near good enough at that this year. I do think we showed better in the last 20 some games of doing a little bit of better job sticking up for each other. In terms of like a guy like Tucky having to fight, like, man, I give him a lot of credit because he stepped up for his teammates a number of times. Sometimes hockey's hockey and things happen and it's just whoever's out there, it's just the way the game goes. But yeah, we certainly don't want Alex having to be doing that very often and taking one of your best players off the ice for five minutes. So yeah, we'll look at it. I think it's an area that we can address. You also, if you want a player that can be in the lineup and help your team, every night as well. But I don't disagree. I just think I need to do a better job there, but we also probably as a team need to be doing a better job of just in it together, if that's a better way to say it.
Lindy, we've heard a lot of players come in here and talk about, what it was like adjusting to your coaching style, your system, and obviously it took a lot longer than you probably hoped, than they hoped. I'm curious what it was like for you adjusting to the players. Like you mentioned a few times during the year, maybe adjusting how you play or adjusting the system a little bit. Like now that the season's over, like I'm curious if you could share just kind of what the back and forth was like and maybe how you changed.
I thought the interaction with the players was incredible. We had honest conversations. We had even with 2 games left, a leadership meeting with my group about, these games. I know they don't mean anything, but here's what we need. Here's where we need to keep getting better. A lot of demanding practices where, we talked about why we're going to practice the way we're going to practice, and I don't think once they let me down when we set out to have high-end compete practices. We competed. We had morning skates a couple times that were compete morning skates. But the conversations with the group and where we needed to go, I thought was real good. I think they've got a good handle on who I am. I've got a really good handle on who they are right now. I know our team, like any other team, falls down every now and then. You got to pick each other up. And I think we got a lot better at picking each other up and moving on. The part was just moving on. We got to move on. And I think the group got good at that.
Kevin, when you look at what are you going to be watching in the playoffs that is relative to your team? I look at how everybody thought this was a year you could take a step up, and other teams stepped down. Boston finally fell. The Rangers fell. And Ottawa and Montreal passed you. And they're in the spots where I think a lot of people thought you might be. So when you watch these playoffs, what are you going to take from these teams that are there? And yet again, you guys are not. How can that play into moving to next season?
Yeah, I think overall watching, you're going to watch all the playoffs, all the teams, and you're always looking at, what the teams do well and where can we improve. But, I guess in particular, I'll be focused on what are the top teams doing to defend really well, the Colorados of the world that have elite offensive players and can score, Edmonton, another example, can score, but are they limiting rush chances against, or how are they limiting high danger chances, and just how are they playing, and what type of D or forwards do they have that maybe makes them play like that? So those would be some of the things I'd be looking at. I also think I'm interested on the high skill teams, how much they're getting to the inside during the playoffs and are getting to the net and scoring greasy goals and dirty goals around the net, because it's great to have, highlight reel 3-on-2 backdoor tap-ins, but you don't see much of that in the playoffs. So I'm curious, when I watch, okay, now how can I take some of the stuff I'm seeing and talk to our players about that, because, I agree. We shouldn't be where we are right now, and we need to change that.
Kevin, Matthias he was kind of down and up this year. I think he probably picked himself up a couple times. Just what did you make of his season as a whole and how he managed to maybe find something toward the end there?
It was nice to see him play the way I believe he's capable of playing in the last, call it 20 to 30 games, whatever, that kind of a spot where he started to really find his game. I thought early in the year he lacked a little bit he just looked like he was playing without confidence, and he lacked his physicality, and he wasn't killing plays the way he can. And, you guys know when he's playing his best, he's heavy and he's hard to play against. And that wasn't what we were seeing early in the season, coming back, maybe just some of the injuries he's had. It just took him a little longer than he or any of us would have wanted or expected. But so I think, season overall wasn't where he needs to be. But the positive of it is that he looked like himself down the stretch, and it was when he went back and played with Rasmus. I also think he kind of settled into the way that he can play to be effective, and also frees up Rasmus to be Rasmus. And so I think he ended on a positive, and he and I talked at length about that today, and how he can go into the off season. He's healthy. And really attack the offseason to make sure that he's ready from day one next year.
Kevin, you touched right there on Rasmus. From your conversations with him, how do you feel like he took on the challenge and grew in his first year as captain?
Yeah, I think he's what I appreciate about Rasmus is how thoughtful he is in all areas of his life, and he went through some new experiences this year, and he shared with me yesterday when we had our exit meeting that he had to kind of figure out what kind of captain he was, and that took him time, and that there's no way to do that until you're going through it. And what he ultimately landed on and found was that there's certain players on the team that he could delegate certain responsibility to and help him out as a leader. And he started to figure that out. And then also he's a leader by example. He's a guy that I think practices an elite level. It's not just the way he plays in games. And so he just needs to know that he doesn't always have to be the one saying something at the perfect time. It's just go be you. The best leaders I've ever been around are just people that they're completely authentic and just carrying themselves that way. And I think that he started to learn that as the year went on. And all of what he went through is totally normal. But he cares. He loves his teammates. He loves the city. He loves the organization, and he's committed. He's committed to getting it right here, which I think is really important for us to have in such a world-class player.